first 2276, request flight services.
October 29th, 2018, early morning over the Java Sea. The pilots were locked in a brutal tug-of-war with their own plane. They kept forcing the nose up while something in the system kept pushing it down. And the 181 passengers on board? Completely unaware. But how could this happen, given that this was a brand new aircraft? And most importantly, how did this lethal journey end? This is the story of Lion Air Flight 610. Don't skip the ending. What you'll discover there will make your skin crawl with anger and frustration. Let's start from the aircraft itself, which was only 2 months old. A Boeing 737 MAX, an updated version of a 1960s design. If you remember, by the year 2010, that old Boeing design became outdated. Airbus moved first, upgrading its A320 with fuel-efficient engines and calling it the A320neo. It didn't require new pilot training and airlines loved it. Boeing rushed to catch up with the market. They made a plan. Instead of building a new jet, they modified the old 737 with larger engines. They called it the 737 MAX. To fit the larger engines, they mounted them higher and farther forward on the wing. Now that changed the way the plane flew. Its nose was becoming more upward than before, but to correct this, Boeing added software called MCAS to push the nose down if it sensed the plane climbing too steeply. Boeing thought they had just balanced out everything by doing this. So they didn't bother to say anything to the pilots about this. Anyway, Lion Air, Indonesia's largest airline, bought the MAX quickly, and by October 2018, they had 11 of them. One of them was PKLQP, the protagonist aircraft of today's story. But PKLQP had problems. In early October, faults were reported in the ADIRU, the system that reads speed, altitude, and nose angle, because a key sensor, the angle of attack vane, was giving wrong data. But instead of replacing it, technicians just reset the system. As a result, the error disappeared and they assumed it was fixed. The truth is, it was not. On October 26, 2018, the plane flew from China to Manado. After landing, more warnings appeared. Incorrect speed and altitude readings, plus a maintenance light. Engineers suspected the stall management yaw damper for this. They ran a test, found no error, and cleared it. But the next day, flying to Denpasar, the same errors returned. Again, engineers repeated the test, and the error vanished. After that, somehow 2 more flights passed without issues. But on the 4th flight, the one just before the original flight of this story, something happened. On the flight from Denpasar to Manado, alerts appeared. Speed trim fail and Mach trim fail. These systems help control the aircraft at high speeds. Without them, handling becomes harder. But the real issue was a faulty angle of attack vane, as we already told you. Inside it, there remains a coil that failed in cold air. At low altitudes, it worked. But higher up, it sent false data, triggering false warnings. In Manado, the engineer didn't know the coil was bad. Plus, due to bad weather, full testing wasn't done. Still, he cleared the plane, saying it could be checked in Denpasar. So, the flight continued. Even during takeoff, the auto throttle didn't work, but the plane flew and landed safely. And finally, in Denpasar, the angle of attack sensor was replaced, but the replacement part was another refurbished piece. Plus, their testing equipment was also faulty, so it cleared even the bad parts. The result? The new sensor gave wrong data. It showed the nose tilted upward by 21 degrees more than it was. It's a lethal error no one noticed. Then came Flight 043, which had just taken off from Bali. A point to be noted here. Until now, MCAS had never been activated. But this time it did. So the control column shook. One side showed one airspeed, the other showed another. Altitude readings didn't match, and the nose pitched down sharply, all thanks to MAAS. Every time they pulled the nose up, MCAS activated again 5 seconds later. So was there no way to turn it off? Yes, there was, with 2 switches. But remember, pilots had no idea MCAS existed, because Boeing never told them about it. Anyway, the captain handed control to the first officer and started the airspeed unreliable checklist. That checklist said fly manually with 10 degrees nose up and 80% thrust. A third pilot sat behind in the jump seat. For a minute it worked. Then the autopilot suddenly disconnected. The stabilizer moved. MCAS was active again, and the nose dropped again fast. So in reality, the plane was dropping, but the system thought it was climbing. Understanding the issue, the captain declared pan, an urgent call, and asked to fly straight. Eventually, the experienced captain figured everything out. He called for the runaway stabilizer checklist. They flipped the stabilizer trim switches. MCAS stopped, but now the nose had to be lifted manually. At that moment, they were using 3 checklists at once. Altitude disagree, airspeed unreliable, runaway stabilizer. The captain chose to continue to Jakarta, a flight of 90 minutes, and at 2:56 in the morning, the plane landed safely. This flight was saved by a sharp captain, a calm crew, and a third pilot who spoke up in time, but none of them knew. This was only the warning, a preview of the disaster still to come. October 29, 2018. Another Lion Air Boeing 737 MAX was about to take off with the same faulty sensor and the same hidden software, but this time the ending would be very different. Lion Air Flight 610 had departed from Tangerang, heading for Pangkal Pinang. Clear skies, no bad weather, just a 1-hour flight. That morning, the captain had reviewed the maintenance log. He only noticed a minor radio issue. He was coughing, probably unwell, and may have skimmed over previous entries. He missed earlier reports of serious malfunctions. Plus, the captain from the previous day hadn't written them down. He described only minor instrument issues, leaving out the runaway stabilizer and the stick shaker. So, the airline assumed the plane was safe to fly. In this flight, there were 181 passengers, 6 cabin crew, 1 company engineer, and 2 pilots on board. The captain, Bhavi Suneja, had flown more than 6,000 hours, mostly on this aircraft, but his past evaluations noted weak teamwork and emergency handling. The first officer, Harvino, had over 5,000 flight hours but also had a record of training difficulties and failed checks. At 6:15 in the morning, they were cleared to taxi, and at 6:21 they got clearance for takeoff. Meanwhile, speed readings showed a small mismatch, 79 on one side, 81 on the other. At the same time, 2 angle sensors outside the plane disagreed by 21 degrees. As the jet passed 60 knots, the first officer's display showed a normal climb, but the captain's stayed flat. It was the first clear sign of trouble, but neither pilot said a word. Then came liftoff, but the moment the captain pulled the nose up, the countdown for the something horrible started that none of the people on board was ready for. First, the left stick shaker activated violently. Then the alarms began, because the faulty angle of attack is too high, and for that reason, a hidden system quietly activated again, MCAS. Now, in such a situation, pilots are trained to hold correct pitch and power and wait until they're 400 feet above the ground before troubleshooting. But the captain immediately started asking about the failure, and the first officer suggested turning back, too soon. It was nothing like the earlier crew who had followed procedures more carefully. 30 seconds after takeoff, ATC asked them to change frequency. The first officer switched but didn't report their emergency. Rather, he was told to climb to 27,000 feet. The captain asked him to begin memory items for airspeed issues, but the first officer didn't respond to that. Neither did the captain repeat. And 7 seconds later, the first officer suggested turning back. When asked about the issue, the first officer vaguely replied, "Flight control problems." But no emergency was declared, so ATC treated it as routine, and that made things worse. Even when the first officer asked about retracting flaps, the captain agreed vaguely. Meanwhile, a new alert appeared, same faulty sensor. At 22, the captain told the first officer to take control. He only replied, "Stand by." Eventually, the handover didn't happen, and MCAS activated again and pushed the nose down like the previous flight. So this airplane was also slowly descending when the air traffic controller asked the crew what altitude they wanted. The first officer said 6,000 feet, but the captain asked for 5,000. Meanwhile, they were cleared to turn left to heading 050 and maintain 5,000 feet. So the captain started the turn, but he did it too much. Naturally, a warning, "Bank angle," sounded in the cockpit. During this time, they retracted the flap, MCAS got reactivated, and the nose dipped for 10 seconds again, making control harder. So the captain asked for flaps 1 again to stabilize the plane, but the plane was still falling at 3,200 feet per minute. Extending the flaps helped for a moment, the stall warning stopped, but then it came back. When the captain somehow managed to pull out of the dive and climb, the airspeed indicator showed 285 knots, too fast for the flap setting. As speed dropped slightly, a new alert came on. Airspeed low, airspeed low. The captain called for memory item, a reminder to follow emergency procedures. But the first officer seemed unsure and gave only part of the checklist. Right from the beginning, it was clear that they were struggling to work as a team. The captain looked stressed. The first officer, confused. Meanwhile, the trim system was still running and the captain kept trimming in the opposite direction. So, altitude warnings went off. They briefly leveled at 5,000 feet at 6:24 and 27 seconds. But once more, then the problems returned soon. The first officer was still looking for the airspeed unreliable checklist. It was right on the cover. Meanwhile, flaps were retracted again, likely by the captain to avoid speed warnings. And by now you know what happens when flaps are off. MCAS kicks in and pushes the nose down again. It forced the captain to pull up the plane, but MCAS returned 5 seconds later, pushing down the plane again. And this back and forth continued 5 times in 1 minute. The captain, being frustrated, didn't follow emergency steps. Probably didn't recognize it as a runaway trim. This time the first officer checked airspeed and called the engineer. But he wasn't MAX trained. Plus ATC gave headings, the captain didn't follow them, and the first officer stayed quiet. And the plane kept falling. Meanwhile, cleared for runway 25 left, the captain gave control at 6:30 and 48 seconds, but didn't mention the trim issue. The first officer, known for weak flying, trimmed up briefly. MCAS also did its job again by pushing the nose down. The captain requested a shortcut to a navigation point called ESALA due to weather, but accidentally used the wrong flight number while making the request. During this time, the tug-of-war between the first officer and MCAS kept going on. The descent rate reached 2,000 feet per minute. It got worse. The first officer was now pulling with 93 pounds of force, but the descent rate passed 10,000 feet per minute. The plane was only 3,200 feet above sea level. Then came the warning, terrain, sink rate. The overspeed alert followed, pull up, but they couldn't do it in the end. At 6:31 and 55 seconds, just under 12 minutes after takeoff, Lion Air Flight 610 crashed into the Java Sea. And all 189 people on board died. ATC tried to contact them, no response. Search and rescue teams soon found wreckage near the last radar point. Investigators recovered the flight data and voice recorders. That's when they discovered that MCAS, a system most pilots didn't know about, was the major factor. It was designed to help with stability by pushing the nose down if the plane climbed too sharply, but it relied on just one sensor. If that sensor failed, MCAS still acted. But Boeing first blamed pilot error and maintenance issues. However, the final report listed 89 findings and 9 contributing factors. These included design flaws, training gaps, and certification failures. Recommendations went to Boeing, Lion Air, the FAA, and Indonesian Air Traffic Control. And Boeing responded only with a bulletin and said current procedures were sufficient.
And to know more about all these aviation crashes and reasons, subscribe to this channel and hit the notification bell. Stay safe until we meet again.